Oh, yeah, because it's in county today. It's just us.
Just us. Until we get somebody new.
Yes, good night.
And I know Tom Coots did say he was going to be here.
Okay. All right.
Oh, and you get to take minutes, good, so at least we have a minute taker.
What?
Says it right here.
Huh?
Says it right there.
I didn't hear that.
You do minutes, I do chair.
All right.
Oh, yeah. Third one. Hey, Tom. How are
Morning.
ya? Morning.
Great, how are you? There we go. What's going on? Another day.
And Tom, you met Mike already?
I don't know, yeah. Mike?
Public Works?
Oh, hi, Mike. I'm Jody Ronning. Nice to meet you. Sorry.
Welcome, Greg.
Welcome to Red Lodge.
Oh, Greg. Greg? Yeah. Fire chief, please.
Police chief,
Can you figure that out?
planning board, and
Yeah, fire con-
city
Oh, I
council.
done it. Oh, there you go.
President. Each of the committees have 3 city council members, so. Okay, I'm gonna call this meeting together of the Public Health and Safety Standing Committee, February 13th. Attending is Tom Coontz, Chief Schrock, Mike Maples, Jody Ronning, and myself, Sandy Conley. Did you have a chance to look at the meeting minutes from last time?
I did. They look good to me.
They look good to me, so if you wanna move, I'll second.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
I'll second. All hands?
Yep, there we go. Okay.
Hey, come on, we're doing this right.
Definitely both.
Update from the last meeting, I noticed that, right after I spoke to the mayor about the handicap corner ramp being icy on Broadway, where the streets, they were sanded, and that's something that Mike Maples might wanna keep an eye on, because all of the buildings on Broadway are supposed to clear their own sidewalks. I know at one point, we had a police officer that went around and knocked on doors and said, your sidewalk is an ice rink, it needs to be cleared.
Mm-hmm.
And I know the difficulty, for instance, the fishing shop who's not open in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
and their sidewalk is an ice rink.
Right now?
Yeah.
The owner's name is Richard Romerson, although he's not here, it's still his responsibility to have it cleared.
Yeah.
Is there a way to contact him and say,
I have his contact information, yeah.
that would be wonderful? That was,
So currently, like right now, it's,
it was yesterday when I walked to
Okay.
a meeting at noon.
all right, yeah, I'll go take a look at it when I'm done here, and,
Yeah, it looked like the eye clinic was also, a little icy. I saw Seymour Realty was bad, but I ran into, Sheila, and she said they'll take care of that.
mm-hmm.
So,
I also heard the Soda Hole area was kind of icy too, because they've been closed.
Soda Hole, see, that's kind of the problem, is those ones that are closed during the winter, aren't doing it, but people are trying to walk, and between the business owner who can get sued for anybody slipping, I assume that the city can get sued on those handicap ramps. So we have nice street and then a sliding ice rink, anyway.
I think that the city needs to continue to pressure the state to fix that problem. I mean, it's a state mistake.
DOT sidewalk is.
Well, it is, and so they redesigned those handicap ramps. I mean, and this was a big deal when it was done. I mean, there's kind of a funny story, but Steve Bullock was governor at the time, right after they were put in, and we were complaining, was walking downtown, and he randomly asked somebody on the streets about him, and she was like, I fell yesterday and broke something on that piece. Like, it's from the day they were put in, they've been wrong, and it's a design error, and, you know, I think the city should not necessarily be responsible for fixing DOT's design error.
You're talking about that you've got the ramp and this big old chunk.
Yeah, so there's there's 3 issues with it. The first issue is that they didn't want to redo the storm drain caps, so the storm drains had a hood on them. And so in order to not redo the storm drain hoods, they had to have the sidewalk be high and the storm drains were in the corner. Typically, you would build that flat there, but the storm drain was in the corner, so they built the piece high. But then they had to get the slope right, so they dropped the slope of the sidewalk, so then you ended up with curves in the middle of the in the middle of those pieces.
Those double ramps.
You go into the ramps, then that creates two problems. The first is a tripping hazard, and then the second is that it holds water. So if you get any snow built up on it and the snow melts at all, then they hold water, and then that water freezes at night, and then you end up with literally what's not a handicap ramp anymore. And since we live someplace where it's kind of snowy 6 months of the year, their improvement of their design actually ended up being less accessible, not more accessible.
I have a storm drain just up from mine, so if I don't clear it, yeah, it turns into a total lake. And I think that's just it, because a lot of the business owners on the corners don't necessarily clear out those storm drains, and so there's no place for the water to go.
Well, and it's hard. I mean, I do these two corners over here, and they're hard to do, and you don't have to, it's hard to find the place to put the snow. If you use a machine, which I do, you hit those triangle raised corners every time. You can't, unless you get out and do it by hand, it's very difficult, and if the snow's hard, it packs it in those things, and then you can't get it out.
The city runs over them with their plow every time they clear those
We need a
parking areas
long-term
there.
solution to it.
Yeah, so it can't be good for your plow.
At that level,
What's Tisdale, wasn't it? Or the regional guy?
Tom
Tisdale?
Yeah, that's right. You know that.
That's who we go through for our street closures.
Well, I was looking at that. Do you guys have the ability to turn
Tom Tinsley.
Speak up, Dave.
while he's going through that, do you guys have the ability to turn on the TV so that I can see who's there and just kind of observe
Turn
better?
on the TV?
The webcam?
Yeah, the webcam and the TV both. Is the TV on?
Yeah, we can see you.
Oh, well, yeah. It's the
Don't lick your
webcam. That was itching. Hey,
How do we do that?
if you knew what my nose had been through the last 4 days, Tom,
How do we do that?
over on the machine on the left, I think there's a share video or
It's
option.
on that one right there. No, that's this one. Tom knows how to do
I don't know if it, oh, yeah, there it is.
it.
That's the arrow. There we go. We're up.
Ah,
Can you see us now?
I did. I knew somewhat who was there, at least partially from conversations, but not everybody.
So Tom,
okay, so there's not anything that the city can do short of sanding those ramps? I know that, they were done when it was really, really bad, and the ramps have those little bips in it, so that actually helps.
all you can do is make sure the storm drains are clear, and then the water will drain. But when we get like 4 feet of snow, it gets really hard because it's just a huge pile of snow.
When did they put those in?
4 years ago, 5 years ago?
5 years ago, yeah.
No, it was longer
And
than that.
there's,
What?
I said, I think it was longer than that. I was thinking it was more like
Yeah.
10 that they,
Well-
was it the same time as the
Yeah,
roundabout?
it's close to 10 years now.
time flies
I
when you're
would
having
think so.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it might be 10 years ago.
So, I mean, other than, it is the business owner on the corner's responsibility to make sure that those are clear. And I personally go out and, try to find the storm drain, just clear it out enough. Even if you get underneath it, the water will find its way in there. But it's a big responsibility for those corner business owners to
Yeah,
have to do that all
I
the
think it's too
time.
much.
I don't
Yeah.
think that
Relying
they
on
know
that is too much.
Yeah, I don't think
Yeah.
they know that, frankly.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a way, literally, if you took a little plow, like you say, and found the storm drain or a
And
snow
I-
blower,
And I think one of the things too is that we now have Willie, who is, paid for by resort tax, and having, spending some extra time to make sure that stuff is correct is probably worthwhile. That's my opinion on it.
yeah.
I do everything I can and you do, but it's hard to get it right all the time.
It is.
I think we can do 85% of it, but you need somebody to come make it right.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that Mike Maples I'm seeing the back of the head of?
Yes, Mike's
Okay.
here.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's hard because the camera's not up there.
Perfect.
New business, fire department, 28 mils of the dollar amount. I know that admin and finance is also discussing some of the fire department, large
Well,
purchases.
and I kind of wanted to make this, if it's okay with you, a dual conversation just about public safety in general, and the ability to have, to possibly take this back to the resort tax, to the voters, and ask if they will change it so part of public safety, which would be the police and our fire, could be paid out of resort tax. I'm not saying all of it, because the resort tax can't afford to pay for all of it, but in the summertime, I mean, our tourists create, I mean, you two right there are responsible for the safety of our tourists and our, you know, that come here in the summertime. And I feel that the resort tax would be a great way to help pay for some of that extra cost of the influx of people we get here in the summertime. So I wanted your opinions on that.
So I chair the resort tax committee in addition to being, I chair the resort tax committee in addition to being the fire chief, and I own a bunch of businesses too, so just give you some perspective there, that these guys understand this perspective. So, what I would say is that when we did it the first time, based on public input, people were adamantly no against that.
Right.
That, pretty strongly adamantly no. So our resort tax, prior to 2000, when we initially did it, was only able to be used for capital improvements. And, you know, I think as a whole, the community saw a need to adjust that. And there was two pushes for this. One was the fact that we had used the resort tax to put in capital improvements in parks, and that there was no funds to pay for any kind of maintenance in the parks. And so there was a push to open up the resort tax to allow for maintenance in parks. There was something that coincided with that, which was we had a bad winter at the exact time that we were doing this. And so that, no snow until February, but from February on, as we did this resort tax process, we had a lot of snow. And so there was a push to have resort tax help pay for snow removal. So there were kind of this big push that resort tax operationally to pay for snow removal and some park maintenance. There was heavy pushback against any city administrative expense. And there was a fair amount of pushback against any law enforcement expense, use of the resort tax. And the concern for most people is that the operational expenses of the city would get eaten up by, would eat up the resort tax, and then there wouldn't be any money for the capital improvements. And so I think it's a heavy lift, and I think, you know, I think it's deciding what the give is, right? Mm-hmm. You know, so if you were to say, hey, we're going to take $250,000 from water and sewer and put it towards police, and you said that specifically, then you would have something to go with them. But the nebulous, you know, we want to allow it as an expense, you're going to have to, right now, there's not a lot of flexibility in the resort tax budget, so you're going to have to, you know, you're not going to give up police cars for operational police expense, right? You're not going to give up the payment for the pool. You're not going to, you know, do you want to give up snow plows? Do you want to give up, you know, sidewalk improvements? Do you want to give, what's the give to the take?
To me, it is about priorities. Right now, we're in the position where we're either going to have to ask for public safety, ask the voters to decide if they want that. That would be, and then on the fire department side, I mean, there's been strong conversations about whether or not we want to ask them to sign a petition, which would, to annex the fire department into the rural fire department, which would, in essence, give them another tax increase.
Mhm.
So, to me, the give is, do you want your resort tax to help pay for this, or do you want an increase in taxes? That's kind of been, that to me is the give and take. It's about priorities,
But-
too. What are your priorities for resort tax? And we did that as a committee,
That,
and we did. But,
and
when
they
they're
were clear,
looking
then
at...
the public was pretty clear.
And they were, but at that time, they weren't thinking that down the road, I may be asked for a tax increase for my public safety.
Could we,
So,
okay, we went
that
from 3% resort tax to 4%. Was that 1% earmarked for capital improvements? Is that correct?
No, so,
Storm drain
So-
project.
storm drain, so that 1% has to be project related.
Right.
And you can only ask for that 1% for a specific project. Our project that we asked for and was approved was, 1% to go towards a stormwater improvement project, which would result in improved stormwater and streets and sidewalks above that stormwater improvement project.
Okay, can we ask for another 1%?
No.
You cannot.
Ever?
Not until, so the 1% has to be a capital improvement project, it cannot be anything operational.
Okay,
And you can't ask for it until you complete the first project.
Right.
So once you ask for, you have to stop levying, you have to stop
the one.
the one and then move on to the next.
And-
But then again, it
and
would
honest-
have to be,
But honestly, when we picked the stormwater for that 1%, for them to vote on that, we realized that that probably won't go away anytime soon, because it's such a huge project.
well, if you include streets and sidewalks, yeah.
Yeah. And
Does that
it
mean-
was.
Does that mean the city's gonna improve our sidewalks?
If they could, wherever the stormwater is being.
The thought was
Ah,
is that you would get, that we would have already done water lines and that the stormwater, and that once this stormwater came through, that would be the last thing that needed to be done, and you could go and do streets and sidewalks above that and have a completed project, through the route of the stormwater.
So we have a long way to go on that.
Oh, yeah, it's 20 years. I think we anticipated you're probably 20 years into
So we
it.
can't increase the 3% portion to 4%.
You cannot.
No, that's a state law. You can,
You're
we could
capped at
increase
3.
it to 4%, but the extra 1%.
Right.
Had to be for project specific.
Because one of the things on my list here is, of course, the the police department. I was hoping that we could get the voters to approve using resort tax for the fire department's overtime, since
Even the police
the police department's overtime, since we're projecting that with all the people in town, the police department is into overtime, there's twice as many.
I think the challenge that you've got is that, both the business owners and the community as a whole didn't want the resort tax to basically substitute the budget for the city. And I think they were pretty adamant about that. They wanted it to do things like buy snow plows, to improve sidewalks, to improve parks, to build the number one thing we heard is they wanted things like pools and ice rinks, they didn't want it all to get buried in the ground. We put $10 million into water and sewer initially off the resort tax, and they were pretty adamant that they didn't want to continue to see that. They wanted to see better results for it. But they also wanted to see, they said, improve snow removal and improve park maintenance.
So, I just am wondering, because that was, I realized, not disparaging anything against the prior, police chiefs and administrations in the past, but I do feel
Situational.
that we are in a different place now, and that there's a lot more support for our police department, primarily because of the way Chief Chirac has handled it. And I don't know, I'm just thinking, can we do a survey? Can the resort tax do a new survey
100%.
to see
Yeah.
if that has changed at all?
Yeah.
Especially, you know, and like I say, I'd like to see it be public safety, like, or maybe we, just for the summer months, some of that is taken out of resort tax because of the impact of our tourists being here.
So I guess, I think part of the challenge is that in the 30 years that I've been involved in this with the city, we've had a lot of these conversations for a lot of time. And everybody has been afraid to ask the voters for money to fund the services that they want. You know, what I would suggest, and maybe instead of telling you the answer, I would suggest you survey other communities and see what they tax.
Yeah.
See, the concept to me is, as a resort town, because we have this influx of vacationers, things happen in town. We have, you know, hits to our infrastructure, but we also have hits to our public safety, both police department and fire department. And because of that, the resort tax should be the item that pays for that. If we were to resort tax, resort town, we might not have those additional expenses. I assume we wouldn't. Our population would be a lot less and.
But one of the things that resort tax has provided is a reduction in property taxes.
It has.
Right, and so, and, you know, I mean, maybe you wanna fight this. I mean, we take 5% of the resort tax and we give it back as a credit on property taxes. And our auditors told us we used to just add that into the general fund budget. And there's auditors came and said, you can't do that.
Right.
You know, I'm not gonna to say whether the auditors are right or wrong, but I will tell you, more than half the other resort communities don't do that.
No, they don't, and I still.
Our
admin and finance committee and Lonnie would love to know how they're getting away with that, because we sure couldn't.
Well, your auditors wouldn't let you do it. I mean, you could take a hit on your audit and do it and see if someone bites you on it. I mean, there are ways you could get another legal opinion on it.
Yeah.
You could ask the resort tax, the newly formed, Resort Tax Association to weigh in on that, but clearly other communities do it differently. But as a result of that, there is a reduction. Everybody, when you got your property tax appraisal, everybody got a notice that said, Red Lodge is the only place where property taxes have decreased over the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's because of the impact of resort tax on the reduction in property tax. And I'm not an advocate for increasing property taxes. But we do have the lowest property taxes in the county as a municipality, right? We are 60% of the property taxes of what city levels for Laurel. We're, I think, less than 60 than what Billings levies. You know, and you would think as a resort community we would be higher. Mm-hmm. And we want to have services like police and fire and public works, but you can't have those services unless you have a conversation with the community about what those services cost. And I think the problem is we keep kicking the can down the road.
We do.
And we have to stop kicking the can down the road. I mean, it's the reality is that we're you know, we live off credit card debt. You know, in a sense, like we're dysfunctional financially because of that. And this is a personal opinion, but I think we have to have a more honest conversation about how you're going to fund the services that you want. And even if you pull $50 or $80 or $100,000 off the resort tax for it, it's still not going to solve the problem.
No, it's not.
And it's going to be a big impact on resort tax. I mean, on the other things that resort tax funds.
I'll do some
Madam,
research
whichever's
and
chair.
then maybe we'll talk about the survey. Dave?
So I have a question or a comment. So first off, I want to point out that we are being aided by the resort tax. When I was on council, police cars had to come out of the general budget. And the fact that we've moved them over changes that significantly. The second, I'm trying to figure out what he's doing. Oh.
Turning the volume up.
Turning you up.
Wow, that's never
Go
happened
ahead.
to me before. All right. Thank you,
I
Chief.
don't hear so well.
And probably never again.
So,
The
so
police
the
cars
first
are
thing
paid
is,
out of the door.
the
Yes.
first thing is to acknowledge that, that we are aided by the fact that we get to use our resort tax for police cars. That's new since when I was on council and we weren't allowed to do that. The other thing is, as we talk about the property taxes, and I'm like Tom, not a big fan of it, but what I'm even more afraid of is that the efforts that I have seen before, whether it be the 28 mills that you mentioned, Jody, or whether it's police, is an unauthentic reach out to the public. And Chief Schrock is missing, and I really wanted him to be able to hear this part, although we've talked about it. The conversations that I've heard before was, I'll use 28 mills just because it's an easy example out there. Let's pass a safety mill of 28 mills and the police will be paid from that. The problem with that approach, as I've heard it presented before, is that it didn't amount to increased services. It was it amounted to increased stuff in the general mill fund, or the general fund. And so to
Right.
me, if you're going to go to the voters, at least if you want my vote on it, you have to explain, here's what we're able to get from the general services. And then what we're doing is we're looking to enhance the services or protect the services, but it would have to come with a protection of some share of money that's already coming from the general fund. The goal is not just to have exactly the same coverage and have you pay more property taxes. It's to have an increase or prevent a decrease from happening. And I think Tom can attest to what happens if you don't clearly communicate that message, because I think that was probably the number one, as I had people reach out and ask me, hey, Dave, you pay attention to this stuff. And I relayed those questions on to Tom, but the number one that I was not able to relay on, because that wasn't clearly communicated, is here's what you will lose if we don't have more money, or here's what we will gain if we do have more money, as opposed to just a way to unauthentically pad the general fund. That's my biggest concern about the conversation as it has occurred in the past. If council wants to go to the public and say, we want more mills for police coverage, that is council's right. But I think that you should, out of fairness to the taxes, also earmark a percentage or a share of the general fund to show that, and if it's not, if you're just going for a general fund, then ask for a general fund and do that. I'm less inclined to do that, because I agree with Tom that municipalities spend money like new college graduates. They live on credit card debt.
Okay, well,
Well, I think we need to kind of come up with a game plan, because I absolutely agree with Tom. We've been kicking this down the road for years.
yeah.
So, it's time to basically stop talking about it at the committee level. And, so I'd love to get a survey together. I think we need to start, public outreach, to everyone, whether it ends up being an ask on the resort tax or a public safety, or, we need to decide which way we're gonna go. Because we can't keep funding, 28 mills for the fire department and the whole salaries for the police department out of our general fund.
No, we need to retain the police officers we have.
And if we do it as a public safety, just, there's,
Survey.
yeah, but I mean, if we do move forward with the public safety, with the idea that some of the fire department and the police department will be paid out of that, that might be an option, or we could just do the police department. There's just so many different ways of looking at this, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need to do.
And I mean, and the bottom line is that we very well could be looking at a city manager situation in the next couple of years, and we're gonna have to pay for that,
Again,
probably out of our general funds, which right now we really don't have that money available.
Yeah.
So, we have to be ready for that. So not only are we looking at trying to pay our fire department and our police department, but we also could be looking at paying for a city manager.
So we need to get together and put together a public safety survey, find
Yeah.
out what the public thinks about which way we should go throughout this whole thing. So that's at least something that we can start with. One of the things that came up last time was crisis management. I asked, because we had this big deep freeze, and we have quite a bit of elderly population who lost their water, and I asked what would happen if our, water system went down, but I was assured that that's good. The next question is, what if we had a huge electrical blackout in the city of Red Lodge like Roundup had? In the city, I
When it's
believe,
50 below?
and it's 50 below. So, does the fire department have a crisis management plan to move everybody
When
out
there's
of their...
generators?
Yeah, I did a little research after you sent me an email to kind of get a better answer for you. So the city's, disaster emergency plan, okay, is, run by the county. So it's a county-wide plan.
Yeah.
And you can have city-specific annexes to that county plan. But in fact, right now, what they're moving to is actually regional plans. So, there's the plans are gonna be done regionally through the state, and then you would have county-specific annexes, and you could have city-specific annexes. I don't know for any of this you would necessarily need a, city-specific annex, but you could build one. They are in the process of redoing that plan right now.
They who?
So the state and the county. So Serena, is the county DES, officer, and, so she is in the process of working, with Jeff Gates, who is our rep for, the state, I believe, to get that, rebuilt. I don't know if there's a contractor involved in this or not. And so, she's really the one to communicate with and to talk about. We actually, at a meeting we had last week, we had a rep from, Northwestern Energy who works at it's actually Serena's husband, but who works at the Dry Creek gas, plant. And so we talked a little bit about, what would happen if we ran out of gas, or something like that happened. So both of those really become a Northwest Energy show, right? Because, and what he said, and I would probably agree with, is that the number one solution there is to try and, refeed the community somehow with power. But if you had a significant power blackout at 30 below or a significant gas cutoff at 30 below, you're probably looking at an evacuation, it's gonna be, it's gonna be challenging to keep people warm, I think that there's,
So one part of
that's a
it,
big issue.
so one part of it is Northwest Energy will work to get it back on.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, how long, I still think the city should have some kind of a plan to say, okay, it's been 12 hours now.
Well, it wouldn't even be 12 hours at 50 below. You're talking, you'd want to start,
And I don't know,
Addressing it pretty quickly.
yeah.
and I don't know what the city would do at that point. Rely on Serena as a county?
Yes, that would be a countywide, you would address it at the county level.
And they would do door knocking like they did during the flood, maybe, to
Yep.
evacuate?
Yep.
Or just
We've had
to check
flood
on
and
people,
fire
make sure their
both. Check on
thermostats
people
aren't
and-
40 degrees.
I think it's I think it honestly is a realistic emergency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it is a good one to look at in the plan and kind of figure out, is there an annex for a major either gas or You know, an electricity outage would probably be more significant than a gas.
Well, a lot of people's
Yeah.
gas furnaces won't work without
Electricity and,
Not the gas.
you know, if you have electricity, you can often keep yourself warm, although
Yeah,
if
you
you
can get space
run out of
heater.
gas, it would be, you'd put a huge load on the electrical system.
Yeah.
Yeah,
People
They,
have-
I believe now with this new line they're putting in that goes west, that they can, backfeed us,
quickly.
more quickly than they could before. Oh, electric, yeah, yeah. We really do have a single gas line that comes in for us, but,
Right now, you have a single power line comes in, or?
yeah.
And who,
I mean, I believe it's 3 feet, but they all come in.
and who would do the evacuation?
Well, yeah, everybody. I mean, so typically,
The county?
it'd be a combination of the sheriff's department, the police department, and the fire department would do that.
And where would you evacuate them to?
So that's the question that would really be, you know, so right now, our designated shelter is the Civic Center, but I don't know if we have,
Generators?
I don't know if we have the generator capacity there to do that, so I think that's a good, that's why I think that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I think the hospital probably has good generators, but you can't overrun the hospital with evacuees necessarily.
What
Yeah,
about the
Maybe-
high
you
school?
would never evacuate people to the hospital.
Yeah,
What was that, Dave?
What about the high school? They might have a more current generator backup system there in the auditorium. That seems like a common location.
Yeah,
so I know that when, during the prior administration, the county was requesting that the city have our own disaster person
Yeah.
in charge of this stuff. Is that no longer an issue?
I don't know, it's not an issue, I just think it's unnecessary. I mean, I think not only is it unnecessary, but I think, who's it gonna be, would be the first question.
Yeah.
How are you gonna train and maintain that person?
Well,
And it ends up being duplicative, because basically all you're gonna do is, there's really only two logical people in our community that you could assign it to right now would be either Greg or I.
yeah.
Right? It's the only logical piece, and then, but we already have our other roles, so, and we have, there's, you know, when you look at the volume of work that happens in disaster recovery, that becomes a piece, like, you know, when you start talking about, you know, managing, FEMA grants and FEMA reimbursement and that kind of stuff. But the reality is that, you know, it's way better to work with the county than it is
Yeah,
to try.
and when they were talking about that, Serena was basically saying it should be, someone who's going to be a first responder anyway. You know, and I think she was saying like like Tim Ryan or John Trapp or somebody like that, or, you know, but then I think it comes down to being a paid position as well, which there again, the city is not really.
Yeah, I mean, I
looking to
think,
do that.
yeah, I mean, I think you can, I think, you know, if you go back really the past 30 years, it's been the primary
You have that, definitely.
person who's done that. So I think having that as the fire chief is not as your, kind of your backup, but really, it's a different job than what the county DES coordinator's doing.
Okay.
Another thing is that in the past, there was an ordinance that was passed to, change the addresses on the numbered streets.
Before we go to that, do we need to follow up with the county then to make sure this is part of that plan somehow? Okay.
I can communicate with Serena about that again and just say, hey, this is, we want to review,
Thank you.
we want to review a power outage, gas outage.
When it's
Especially
And-
evacuation.
And really, it's a winter evacuation piece. You know, the kind of you know, for us, fire, flood, and, winter storm are the three, you know, most likely, disasters. But, you know, I mean, there should be an annex in for, you know, what if our water plant does go down? You know, I mean, what what do we do if we lose our water system? I mean, that's happened to a lot of communities in Montana. You know, what would you do if you lost the sewer system? Those are, you know, power, gas, water, sewer, you know, losing any of those.
The necessity
No.
of life services.
Yeah, snow is less of an issue for us as a municipality because we're kind of,
Used to it?
well, we're kind of used to it and we're kind of independent, right?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we can survive if Highway 220, if all the highways in and out of town are closed for 3 days,
We
this
hunker
community can survive.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the biggest issue there becomes medical transports.
Yeah.
You know, but,
Okay, thank you, Tom. Does that answer?
Okay.
Okay, sorry,
Addressing.
wanted to make sure where we were at.
Addressing project, I know that there's an ordinance in place. It only affects those that are on the that the houses face the numbered streets. I'm kind of, I know this was during Glory Mahan's time, and I'm kind of unsure why it was done, because people don't know that 11th is the break off between north and south.
so it's a Google addressing problem, essentially, is
It's
what.
Google.
Well, it is and it's not, but, so what happens is that in most communities, if you want to find the 100 block, the 100 block sits between First and Second Street, and the 200 block sits between Second and Third Street. Pretty standard in addressing. In our system, it don't work that way. And so instead of changing everybody's block numbers, the simpler piece is to change the street numbers and make 11th Street a non-numbered street, and then you would have First Street South and First Street North, First Street North, First Street South.
Like they do in Billings.
Like they do in almost every other community. Yes, I mean, that's pretty standard. And then the 100 block south is between South First and South Second. And the 100 block north is between North First and North Second. And then that just makes more sense to not only people thinking about it. Like if I were to say, what street is 700 southward, what streets are they, if I want to go to 703 southward, what street is it located between?
Between 18th and 19th.
Right? You guys know that, but I guarantee you that outside of this room, nobody knows that. And
Every realtor knows it.
but I would have, even I have to think about it. Like I have to do, it's not,
11 plus 7, yeah.
Yes.
When we train new officers, they're dumbfounded.
Are they?
Yep.
yeah. So that was the piece. So there was some political will to fix this problem, right? But what does it mean? It means two things, and we've got another issue that I don't know how this came from. Somehow, when the states put new street signs on Broadway, they have forgotten that there's a north and south.
Yeah.
And that's not gonna change. So I don't, even with this process, that doesn't change. So those street signs all need to be changed.
So there's an expense involved.
Those are
here.
DOT signs. Yep, what's that?
So there's an expense.
There's an expense. I mean, and for a long time, we had $30,000 budgeted to do this project. But ultimately, it was a public works project, realistically, right? It's, you know, we can say fire and police have an interest in this, but what the street signs actually say is a public works project. And there was not the will to actually complete the project. The council voted on it, we had public hearings on it, and we had a contest to name this street. We named the street, I mean, you know, we did a lot of things, but there was nobody to take this over the finish line. And nobody, and ultimately, the reality is it was Public Works didn't want to take it over the finish line.
So Public Works needs to come up with a budget for it.
Yeah, figure out what signs need to be changed, and then we have to work with county addressing to I mean, and Tom Coley had all he had done all that work. Who need to be addressed, what their new addresses would be. Was that Tom Coley is the county GIS?
KOHLAY.
And basically what I'm looking for from council is just either, yes, make this happen, in which case me and Mike will make it happen, or no, never mind, forget about it. And to me, that's basically, did the two safety officers sitting across from you persuade you that we really do need to make it happen?
I go back, I go back and forth on it. It would help.
Yeah.
It's a change, but it would help.
I've been here for so long that I understand the numbering of the streets and the addresses as it relates. Would it be better? Yes. Would it be better for people coming into the community? Yes. Would it be better for new officers, firefighters, paramedics, all that stuff? Yes.
UPS. Seriously.
They just drop it off at the post office.
Because they'll drop it off at the post office and then they send it back to the sender. It's happened to me.
Oh, yeah.
I can't tell you how many times.
That's another issue we can't.
But, I mean, it's not a Band-Aid, it's a permanent fix. Why not get it done now than 10, 15 years down the road?
Yeah, I mean, if you're ever gonna wanna do it, you have to do it now.
Mhm.
If you, and I think, Dave's comment is right. Either we're gonna do it, or we're gonna say we're never gonna do it.
So,
Because it doesn't make any sense to say we're gonna do it in 10 years.
because the ordinance is in place, we could just pass a resolution, or vote on a resolution to move ahead with the project.
The ordinance actually passed to say that we were gonna do this, and it was
Right.
never followed through, so it was a management issue.
Right.
So I would think
I didn't
that
know that.
what I would like to see, Jody, is exactly that, just a resolution from council that says, make it so. And then
Okay.
it's up to Mike and me to make it so.
Okay. I know there's a lot of pushback from people in the community, but,
Did the Tom Coley guy put all that together?
It's been 5 or 6 years.
oh, it's been a long time. Yeah.
2018-ish, we could look at the ordinance number and verify it rather quickly, but yeah, and that it, in fairness, it happened right before COVID, before fire, before flood, so there has been things come up, but it really has just been a level of prioritization. My recollection, there was like 200 houses or 243 houses that actually that were going to be impacted. The way the method was selected was, what is the least impact directly to property owners as opposed to changing out signs? And so it was a cost, and how many people's life do we disrupt?
And I think there was, I think there's probably, and Greg kind of indicated, there's a history piece to it, right? Like, if you lived on First Street or Second Street, or, your whole life, and you've been here for 80 years, and all of a sudden now it's gonna become, 6th Street South or 6th Street North, right? Like, I mean, I think that's been some of the resistance
It
too,
is.
right? Like, it's just, like, everybody knows it's right, but then there's this piece of nostalgia that doesn't want to make the move to do it.
They don't like change.
It's change, but I think it's more than change. It's just it's. I think nostalgia is maybe the right word. Like, it's history, and yeah.
I know, I mean, I was probably one of them, and I was like, why are we doing this? We're such a small town, who cares? But, I can understand more now. I think it's also getting the word out on why it's happening. So
Well-
we're not just doing this on a whim.
But regardless, we have to get the Broadway streets changed so they say North and South Broadway again, because what happens is Google does come and take pictures of that, and there was a while where Google was saying that the 100, if you were at 100, they were putting it back at First Street.
Yeah.
And so that when I said it's a Google problem,
Yeah.
there is some of it is that the computer systems make assumptions about our addressing, and if they get it wrong, then it puts addresses in the wrong place, and everybody uses Google Maps, from
Oh,
the
yeah.
FedEx guy to the police guy to me, we all use it, and
Well-
if it's not right, you end up in the wrong place.
And I
And
do
we
see
know
that
that.
a lot where they can't find my address
Well,
sometimes. That happens a lot.
We had an operation that I did a briefing for, a couple weeks back, and when I mapped it to show a photo in the brief, it mapped at the other end of the city.
Yeah, no, I get
So-
that, when I,
It's, so.
yeah,
And this project was paid for out of resort tax. It was a capital improvement, 2
Oh.
streets,
yeah.
and so it was not a general fund budget item, it was a resort tax item, is my recollection. And it's a perfectly reasonable resort tax item to fix that.
And it's
That needs to happen.
it's ordinance number 926, and it was passed in 2016, it looks like, for reference.
8 years ago.
Okay, so,
Okay. Okay.
well, we can, I guess I'm just trying to decide if we should come up with a resolution in here, or if we should ask Public Works to come up with a resolution. That committee, because it is, like you say, a Public Works, thing. I can talk to Chris Keys and have her, I think she's the
Put that
chair.
on the agenda as well.
Yeah, and come up with, I'll see her next meeting, so, since it is more of a Public Works issue, I'll ask Chris to, write that resolution, and we'll get it before council, so we can move forward, hopefully,
Great.
or not. So,
One of the things that isn't on the agenda that I had heard was requested in the past and fluffed over was our fireworks ordinance that doesn't allow fireworks anywhere in town. But every one of us knows that it happens all the time, but by the time the police get there, it's over. And I think that somebody told me that, the chief asked to allow it, fireworks on the 4th of July during a certain time period.
My biggest answer to that was when people would ask, historically, what we've told them is if you go south into that super heavily wooded area, it's safer to shoot them, it's legal to shoot them off out there.
yeah.
Our fire suppression assets are in, if I'm wrong, jump in. Our fire suppression assets are right here within the city, right on 3rd and North Broadway. And, it makes zero sense in terms of fire safety to tell somebody to go into a wooded area because it's legal. I mean, like, everything needs to be kept within reason, obviously, and, you know.
I think that,
The general fire department, party line is that fireworks are bad and they, they should not be, waxing ordinance isn't good. But I would agree with the chief on this one. And, I think where you have seen your resistance is from dog owners who don't,
And
animal owners who
PTSD
don't like
vets.
fireworks. And so
And who?
that's what,
PTSD.
yeah, that's where when they drove down this road and got very close, and there was a lot of resistance from community pet owners who did not want the fireworks to be legal. And so that's where it, so this is probably the 3rd or 4th time that we've had this, we've had, at a much bigger level, up, to the ordinance almost change level, conversation in the community, and every time it gets close, but not the will to actually get it passed. And I don't know if it's ever come to a vote or not, but it's just never
The
never
last time it came, not this last year, but when the ordinance got changed and they were going to allow it, the ordinance actually got tightened up, so you couldn't even do sparklers in town.
It's one of those things, and especially for dog owners, it may come as a shock to people. I've been a cop for 17 years, and people still choose to break the law. It's even on the 4th of July, illegal or not, it happens. And I think during lockdowns was one of the most psychotic years I've ever seen. People were shooting them in our patrol cars.
I know, I
Well,
remember.
It was just one of those
So-
things where I kind of shrugged, I'm like, I understand.
Yeah.
So Sandy, if I may offer, so there, a couple of thoughts here. One, an ordinance doesn't necessarily have to be 100% enforceable to provide value. So is it less? If it remains on the books, what we will do this year is something that hasn't been done before, and we'll put a sign up as people come into town. FYI, fireworks are not allowed in town. Tom made a comment that I think is ultimately the solution, which is that just think of it in terms of time frame. But if you ultimately want to settle it, put it on the ballot. That way, when people say, why do you have fireworks? You say, well, the voters voted on it and they said they wanted to. Or why do you not have fireworks? The voters voted on it and said they didn't want to.
To play the other side of the fence here, it might be an attorney question, I'm certainly not an attorney. would voting on it on the ballot and allowing fireworks for a period of time, would that open up the city to any type of liability if somebody gets their hand blown off? Like Red Lodge allows it, and I blew my hand off. And this is, you know, I can understand either way, but I'm, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think it would, I
So
think it wouldn't
liabil-
be the voter initiative, and then it's just a law.
And the
Okay.
county allows it.
Yeah, liability is covered
and the
if
state
it's a
allows it,
legal
so it's not-
activity.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
that's just a question that I have.
If you were to, yeah.
That's an interesting idea to put it on the ballot. It's
Why
gonna be a
not?
very
Yeah,
busy
it makes
ballot.
So in a sense, but to Greg's question, we might be more covered if we made it legal, because like I said, if it's a legal activity, then we are covered. If it's not a legal activity, then we have to prove that we were
That makes
making a
sense, yeah.
valiant effort to protect against it, which is why we would have signs coming into town.
Right.
So, I mean, I've always been, I remember several years where, you know, I remember when Bill Bullock was on the highway patrol and someone on South Platte was shooting off fireworks and they went off right underneath his highway patrol car.
That's even better than it was Bill.
I know. Not the same names. It actually wasn't us. I was out watching them, but.
You witnessed it.
I witnessed it. He was
Oh, how
not
fun.
happy.
Did he slam on the brakes and jump out?
Yes. But, I guess I've always been of the opinion that they're gonna be shut off regardless of the law on the 4th of July.
And I'll tell you,
And,
I'm a pretty seasoned guy in this job. I've been doing it for a long time. There is nothing worse than writing somebody a citation on the 4th of July for having fireworks. It feels,
It just feels wrong.
it feels un-American.
Wrapped in
I know,
flag.
and,
Yeah.
and I
How
just,
many did
a
you
lot
write
of,
in the last 5 years?
Me personally, 0.
yeah. A lot of, I just feel a lot of communities allow them on the 4th of July.
But in
And-
Laurel, they got a huge
Yeah,
deal
so,
there. I don't know if they shoot off, like,
and I realize
they're
there's a
allowed
lot
in
of,
Laurel, because they have their big
Yeah, the
public
show.
show. Yeah, they
Yeah.
have their big public show.
so I just, yeah, I know we always get a lot of pushback and,
But it
from
goes
pet
to the
owners,
local
but they're gonna have, I mean, they're gonna go off anyway. People know they're going off on the 4th of July. They get their dogs meds. I know the dogs hate them, but, you know,
yeah,
it's just,
I think there's probably the either you say they're not allowed and you allow them to happen, or you
Right.
say they're allowed, and maybe by saying they're not allowed and allowing to happen, you get less, if people aren't going out and buying, $1,000 worth of fireworks to light off on South Platte.
Cody.
Right, going to Cody, I mean, so there is a balance there, right? Like, maybe it is just saying, hey, they're not legal, but, we are reasonable on the 4th of July and our enforcement of this, and maybe, but then when the guy's got, 75 M80s and he's got them lined up down the street, you
well,
can
those
go,
aren't
and you,
legal in Montana.
but it goes, it gives you something to go and say, hey, dude, you're gonna get a ticket if you don't make this stuff disappear.
Like reckless behavior.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Using fireworks, yeah. And it's just, I understand it. I live out in the county and, 4th of July, I mean, like, I don't have a lot of neighbors, but I got some down the road here and there, and they'll shoot off fireworks. I've had horses run through fence, my horses.
Yeah,
It's just, it's part of,
The
it's
4th
just
of
part,
July.
it's part of the game. It is what it is.
Well-
Frankly,
regardless, there's no way that anything will be passed this year, so I guess I would say, Dave, go ahead and put up your signs. So,
Yeah,
at the end of-
I will make sure that we have a legally defensible. We have done our effort to make sure people understand it's illegal. And then you guys need to look at what the deadline is for the November ballot. And you're passing it, and probably your council will be passing it in July, August timeframe or somewhere to make sure it's on a November ballot if you want to give it to the voters.
okay,
Okay,
Sounds good.
And reach
Thank
out
you.
and see what council's opinion is, or if you want to do public outreach or whatever, do it.
okay.
Okay.
I'll put it in my report.
anything else from you two?
just quickly, and I think you guys have both heard this, is that, we are, trying to, continue to figure out how to fix EMS in the county, locally for us, but also now we've moved basically to a county-wide piece. The county commissioners on Thursday will, likely pass a resolution of intent to do a countywide mill, for EMS. What that will mean, what they won't finally decide on the amount until March. It will be on the the June primary ballot. So right now we're doing surveys of countywide surveys to figure out what people's thoughts and tolerances are. And then, so the likely piece is 18 mills right now, which for, it would replace the $69 fee for 50% of the people, it would be a decrease in what they pay in Red Lodge. Approximately 50% of the people would be a decrease in about 50% would be fee.
Okay.
And if you go $5 or $10 on either side of that, it's less than, a lot less than that.
Thank you, guys, I appreciate your attending.
Yes, thank you.
It really helps, otherwise we just ask a bunch of questions and then get nothing.
I'm gonna leave this meeting and go join the next one. Tom, thank you for being there this morning, sir.
No wonder how many people showed up.
I don't know.
Andy's just like